He didn't even look uncomfortable saying it. "We're just making a small adjustment to your clearance," my manager said, fingers laced together on the desk between us. Usual. Like he was asking me to switch seats in a meeting. I felt my chest tighten instantly. My clearance wasn't a detail. It was the final requirement for the promotion I'd been verbally promised for months. Without it, I was dead in the water. I opened my mouth to speak, then stopped. His eyes flicked up to mine, not apologetic, not surprised. Satisfied. That look told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some administrative error that would be fixed by next week. This was deliberate. I forced my face to stay neutral, even though my heart was pounding. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me panic. "Is there a reason?" I asked quietly. He shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "Just standard protocol. Nothing to worry about." But his smile said otherwise. The room felt too quiet after he said it. No paperwork. No explanation. No timeline for when this adjustment would be reversed. Just a sentence that erased years of work in 5 seconds. I felt heat crawl up my neck, my fingers curling slightly against my thigh to keep them from shaking. I scanned his face for something, hesitation, doubt, anything that looked human. There was nothing. That's when I realized this wasn't procedural. This was intentional. This was him making sure I stayed exactly where I was while someone else got what I'd earned. I stood up slowly, keeping my voice even. "Okay. Thanks for letting me know." I walked out of his office with my head held high, but my thoughts were screaming. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was sabotage. And he thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I'd just accept it, maybe get emotional, maybe quit. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I walked back to my desk like nothing had happened. My hands were steady now. My breathing was controlled. But inside everything was spinning. My name is Megan Whitfield. I'm not dramatic. I'm not loud. I'm the person people rely on when things quietly need to be done right. And for the last 8 years, I had built my career brick by brick inside that company. Carefully, cleanly, without shortcuts. Which is why what he did next hurt even more. Because I'd trusted him. I'd believed him when he smiled and said I was ready. I'd believed him when he pulled me into bigger projects and told me to start thinking like a leader. I'd been so foolish. But that was over now. The trust was gone. And in its place was something sharper. Something that wouldn't let this go. I opened my laptop and started a new document. I titled it simply, Timeline. The promotion wasn't a rumor. My performance reviews were spotless. Senior leadership had already floated my name in meetings. I'd been pulled into higher-level projects specifically to prepare for the next step. My manager, Derek, had even smiled at me 2 weeks earlier and said, "Start thinking about how you'll lead the team." I believed him. That was my mistake. Because now, sitting at my desk staring at my screen, I could see the pattern I'd ignored. The small comments, the redirected praise, the way he'd started taking credit for my ideas in meetings. I'd brushed it off as miscommunication, as him being enthusiastic, as normal workplace stuff. But it wasn't normal. It was calculated. He'd been setting this up for weeks, maybe months. And I'd been too focused on doing good work to see it coming. I pulled up my email and started searching. Every conversation about the promotion. Every project assignment. Every performance review. 3 days after my clearance was adjusted, I stopped getting invited to meetings. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious. One calendar invite vanished. Then another. I'd hear decisions had been made. Decisions I should have been part of after the fact. People would reference conversations I wasn't included in. Projects I'd been leading were suddenly being co-led with someone else. It was subtle. And it was deliberate. I didn't complain. I didn't ask why. I just watched. And I wrote it all down. April 12th. Removed from Project Phoenix strategy meeting. No explanation given. April 13th. Status report sent to Derek. No response for 48 hours. April 14th. Found out Taylor was now co-leading the client presentation I'd built from scratch. Every detail, every date, every time I was cut out or pushed aside. Because emotion feels good in the moment, but documentation lasts longer. In a team meeting the following week, he said it out loud for the first time. Megan's still developing in a few key areas. I felt every head turn toward me. The room went silent. Taylor shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Others suddenly found their notebooks very interesting. I smiled politely, nodded, let him talk. She's great at execution, Derek continued, his tone almost friendly. But leadership requires a different skill set. We're working on it. Working on it. Like I was a problem that needed fixing. Inside something hardened. Because he wasn't just blocking my promotion anymore. He was rewriting who I was. He was creating a narrative that would justify keeping me exactly where I was. And if I reacted emotionally, if I argued or defended myself in that moment, I'd look exactly like what he was implying. Not ready. Not composed. Not leadership material. So I did the only thing I could do. I stayed silent. Every instinct in me wanted to defend myself. But I didn't. I wrote things down instead. Access changes. Meeting removals. I'd learned a long time ago that emotion feels good in the moment, but documentation lasts longer. I also started paying attention to who was benefiting from my absence. Taylor had been with the company for 2 years. She was good at her job, I wouldn't deny that. But she didn't have the experience I had. She hadn't built the client relationships I'd spent years developing. Yet suddenly, she was in every meeting I wasn't. She was presenting work I'd started. She was being praised for insights that sounded suspiciously like the ones I'd shared in earlier conversations. And Derek was making sure everyone noticed her. I didn't blame Taylor. She probably had no idea what was happening. She was just doing her job. But Derek knew. He knew exactly what he was doing. Someone else started leading the work I'd built. Someone newer, louder, less experienced. And suddenly everything made sense. This wasn't about my readiness. This wasn't about developing key areas. This was about control. Derek didn't want me promoted because a promotion would mean I'd be his equal. Maybe even his superior, depending on how the restructuring went. He wanted someone he could mold. Someone who didn't have the institutional knowledge I had. Someone who wouldn't question him. I sat at my desk one evening, long after everyone else had left, and let that truth settle over me. He wasn't just blocking my career. He was protecting his own position. And he was willing to lie, manipulate, and sabotage me to do it. That's when I decided I wasn't going to let this go quietly. I was going to fight back. But I was going to do it the right way. One night I checked something quietly. Clearance changes weren't automatic. They required justification, approval, and timestamps. Which meant one thing. There should have been a trail. I logged into the internal system and searched for my clearance history. First, everything looked normal. Active status. Full access. No flags. Then I scrolled down to the modification log. There it was. April 9th. Status changed from active full to active restricted. But there was no reason listed. No ticket number. No approval chain. Just Derek's name as the requesting manager. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my pulse quickening. If he'd done this properly, there would be documentation. Formal request. A business justification. Something that explained why my clearance needed to be restricted. But there was nothing. Just a unilateral change with no paper trail. That was a mistake. His mistake. I found it buried deep in my inbox. An old email chain from 6 months ago. Name. Full clearance approval. No expiration date. The email had come from the security compliance team, confirming that my clearance had been upgraded to support my expanded role in client-facing projects. Derek had been copied on it. He'd even replied, "Great, thanks for expediting this." So he knew. He knew I had full clearance. He knew it was permanent. He knew it was tied to my role. And he changed it anyway. I saved the email to 3 different locations. my personal drive, a USB stick, and a cloud backup. Then I sat back and waited, because I'd learned something important over the years. When someone makes a mistake, you don't point it out immediately. You wait. You watch. You let them think they got away with it. And then, when the moment is right, you let the truth speak for itself. The compliance review email went out company-wide on a Monday morning. Routine. Standard. Unremarkable. Except for one line. Please submit historical clearance modification records by end of week. I read that line 3 times, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The company did these audits twice a year. I'd been through 4 of them since I started. They were tedious but necessary, making sure everyone's access levels matched their roles and responsibilities. And this time, Derek was going to have to explain why he'd restricted my clearance without proper documentation. Felt my pulse steady. 'Cause now, it wasn't just me watching. Corporate was watching too. I went back to work like nothing had changed. But inside, I was counting down the hours until Derek realized what was coming. That afternoon, Derek stopped by my desk. Just wanted to check in, he said lightly, his hands in his pockets. Everything good. I looked up and smiled. Of course. He nodded, lingering a second too long. His eyes darted to my screen, then back to my face. You saw the compliance email, right? I did, I said calmly. Pretty standard stuff. Yeah, he said, still not moving. Just making sure everyone's on the same page. There was something off about his tone. Something nervous. He was worried. I'll have my files ready by Friday, I said, turning back to my computer. Shouldn't take long. He hesitated like he wanted to say something else. But he didn't. He just nodded and walked away. I waited until he was out of sight. Then I allowed myself a small, private smile. He was starting to realize he'd made a mistake. And there was nothing he could do about it now. Files were due Friday. By Thursday afternoon, nothing had been submitted from Derek's team. Excuses started circulating. System issues. Delays. Formatting problems. I heard him on a call in his office, his voice tense. I just need another day. There's some discrepancies I need to clean up first. Discrepancies. That was one way to describe it. But delays don't erase records. They highlight them. The compliance team wasn't known for their patience. They had deadlines for a reason. And when managers started making excuses, it raised red flags. I kept my head down and focused on my work. I'd already submitted my files on Tuesday, complete and organized. Everything was clean. Everything matched. Because I had nothing to hide. By the end of Thursday, I heard through the office grapevine that Derek had requested an extension. The compliance team had denied it. The deadline was tomorrow at 5. No exceptions. Friday morning arrived with unusual tension in the office. Derek's door was closed. His blinds were drawn. I could see him through the gap, hunched over his computer, typing furiously. People walked past his office quietly, exchanging glances. Everyone could sense something was wrong. At 11 I got an email. Not from Derek. From the compliance team. Can you confirm whether you requested or were notified of any clearance changes in the last 6 months? I closed my eyes for a brief second. Then I opened them and read the email again. This was it. This was my moment. Could lie. I could say I didn't remember. I could protect Derek and hope this all blew over. Or I could tell the truth. I opened my saved files and began attaching documents. The original clearance approval. My access logs. Timestamps showing when my access was restricted and by whom. No accusations. No commentary. Just facts. I typed a brief response. Please see attached documentation. Happy to discuss further if needed. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. But my heart was racing. There was no going back now. I just handed corporate everything they needed to see what Derek had done. And he had no idea it was coming. I went back to work, answering emails, reviewing reports, acting like it was any other Friday. But every few minutes, I'd glance toward Derek's office. His door stayed closed. At 2 in the afternoon, I saw someone from HR walk past my desk toward his office. They knocked, waited. The door opened. They went inside. The blinds stayed closed, but I could see shadows moving. 2 people became 3, then 4. 30 minutes later they all filed out. Derek stayed inside. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything dramatic. But I felt the air change. People stopped laughing near his office. Conversations dropped to whispers. Something had shifted and everyone could feel it. The rest of Friday passed in eerie quiet. Derek's door stayed closed. He didn't come out for lunch. He didn't attend the afternoon meeting he'd scheduled. At 4 I saw him finally emerge, his face pale and tight. He walked straight to the elevator without looking at anyone. He didn't come back. By Monday morning, the whispers had turned into rumors. Did you hear Derek got called into a meeting? I heard compliance found something. Someone said there's an investigation. I kept my head down and stayed out of it. I didn't confirm anything. I didn't add to the gossip. I just worked. But on Tuesday I noticed something. Decisions that used to go through Derek were now bypassing him entirely. People who used to ask for his approval were going straight to his boss instead. He was still showing up to work. But his authority was slipping. Power doesn't vanish loudly. It drains quietly, meeting by meeting, decision by decision. On Wednesday I was added back to meetings. Carefully, quietly. No announcement. Just a calendar invite that reappeared. Then another. Then another. No apology. Just correction. I showed up to the Project Phoenix strategy meeting like I'd never been removed. People glanced at me when I walked in, uncertain. Derek was there too, sitting at the far end of the table. He didn't look at me. The meeting proceeded normally, but something was different. When I spoke, people listened. When I shared ideas, they were noted and acted on. And when Derek tried to redirect the conversation, he was politely ignored. It was subtle, but it was unmistakable. The power dynamic had shifted. By the end of the week, Taylor approached me after a meeting. Hey, I just wanted to say, I didn't know about the clearance thing. I hope you know I wasn't trying to. I know, I said gently. You're fine. This isn't about you. She nodded, relieved. Okay. But because I'd hate to think. Really, I said. It's fine. The email came from compliance the following Monday. Clear. Formal. Final. Your clearance status has been reviewed and reinstated to full access. Effective immediately. I read it twice. Then once more. It was done. Officially. I closed my laptop and took a long, slow breath. It was tempting to feel victorious. To feel like I'd won some battle. But this wasn't about winning. This was about being treated fairly. About having my work recognized. About not being pushed aside because someone else felt threatened. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just got back to work. But later that day, I overheard something that made me pause. They're expanding the review, someone whispered near the break room. Apparently Megan's case wasn't the only one. I stopped walking and listened. Derek did this to other people. That's what I heard. Compliance is pulling files from the last 2 years. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Other people. He'd done this to other people. I didn't know their names. I didn't know their stories. But I knew they existed. People like me who'd worked hard, who'd been promised opportunities, who'd been quietly sabotaged. And Derek had gotten away with it. Till now. The whispers continued throughout the week. Meetings were being held behind closed doors. More people from HR were showing up. More files were being requested. Derek stopped coming to team meetings. His office stayed dark most days. And then one morning he just didn't show up. No calendar updates. No explanation. His name simply disappeared from internal directories. By afternoon, his office had been cleared out. Just like that. There was no announcement. No company-wide email. Just a quiet absence where he used to be. People exchanged looks but didn't say much. We all understood what had happened without it being spoken. Unauthorized actions. Intentional suppression. Documented misconduct. He didn't get to defend himself publicly. Because evidence doesn't argue. The following week HR called me in. I walked into the conference room expecting another round of questions. Instead, I found two senior managers waiting, along with someone from the executive team I'd only seen in company-wide meetings. "Megan, thank you for coming," the executive said, gesturing to a seat. "We wanted to speak with you personally." I sat down, my heart rate picking up slightly. "First, we want to apologize," she continued. "What happened to you should never have happened. The way your clearance was handled, the way you were excluded from projects, it was unacceptable." I nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. "We've completed our review," she said. "And we'd like to formally offer you the promotion to Senior Project Director. Effective immediately." I blinked. The room felt suddenly too bright. "With full oversight authority, decision-making power, and a seat in strategic planning meetings," she added. "This should have happened months ago." I stared at them for a moment, processing. This was real. The promotion was real. Not a verbal promise. Not a "we'll see." Not a dangled carrot that would be snatched away. Real. "We're also implementing new policies," the HR manager added, "to ensure this type of situation doesn't happen again. Clearance modifications will require documented justification and approval from 2 levels of management. And we're creating a direct reporting channel for employees who suspect retaliation." I nodded again, my throat tight. "Do you accept?" the executive asked, watching me carefully. Took a breath. "Yes, I accept." She smiled. "Good. Welcome to the leadership team, Megan." We shook hands. Papers were signed. Details were discussed. And when I walked out of that conference room, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not triumph. Not vindication. Just peace. The news spread quickly. By the end of the day, people were congratulating me. Some seemed genuinely happy. Others looked uncomfortable, probably wondering if they'd been complicit in what happened. Taylor found me by my desk. "Congratulations," she said, and she meant it. "You deserve this." "Thanks," I said. "And hey, I meant what I said before. This doesn't change anything between us." She smiled, relieved. "Good. Because I was worried." Over the next few days, I settled into my new role. New office. New responsibilities. New meetings with people who actually listened when I spoke. It was strange at first. Being in rooms where I was respected by default. Where my ideas weren't stolen or dismissed. Where I didn't have to fight to be heard. But I adjusted. Because this was where I was always supposed to be. And Derek. I never heard from him again. No apology. No explanation. No attempt at closure. I didn't need it. Because the moment I stopped reacting emotionally was the moment his power over me ended. When he restricted my clearance, I could have stormed into his office. Could have yelled. I could have gone straight to HR in anger. And I would have looked exactly like what he was implying. Not ready, not composed, not leadership material. Instead, I documented. Waited. I let the system expose what he'd done. I chose patience over impulse. Strategy over emotion. And that choice changed everything. Months later, I ran into someone who'd worked with Derek at his previous company. Over coffee, they mentioned casually that he'd been let go from that job too. Same thing, they said. Retaliation against people who threatened his position. He just couldn't help himself. I stirred my coffee, absorbing that information. Derek hadn't changed. He just moved on to a new place where people didn't know his pattern yet. Until he tried it on the wrong person. I thought about the others sometimes. The people he'd done this to before me. The ones who'd probably quit rather than fight. The ones who'd walked away believing they weren't good enough. I hoped they knew now that it wasn't them. It was never them. It was him. And I hoped that wherever they were, they'd found places that valued them properly. Because that's what I'd learned through all of this. Your value doesn't change based on who recognizes it. I was the same person on the day Derek restricted my clearance as I was the day I got promoted. Same skills, same work ethic, same dedication. The only thing that changed was who was watching. And when the right people finally looked, they saw what had been there all along. Someone worth promoting. Someone worth trusting. Someone worth respecting. Not because I demanded it, but because I'd earned it. Looking back now, I'm almost grateful it happened. Not for the pain. Not for the frustration or the sleepless nights or the moments I doubted myself. But because it taught me something essential. The people who try to diminish you are usually the ones most threatened by your potential. Derek didn't block my promotion because I wasn't ready. He blocked it because I was. And that terrified him. But his fear became my freedom. His scheme became the evidence that set everything right. I still work at the same company. Still lead the same teams. Still build the same kinds of projects. But now I do it from a position of real authority. With real support. With real respect. And every time I approve someone's clearance or champion someone's promotion, I remember what it felt like to have mine taken away. I remember the silence, the exclusion, the doubt, and I make sure no one on my team ever feels that way. 'Cause that's what real leadership looks like. Not control, not fear, but trust. And that's something Derek never understood.